one gentleman in the audience. I call to order the State of Rhode Island Coastal Resources Management Council's Planning and Procedure Subcommittee to order. Today is Tuesday, April 14, 2026. I would ask that the record reflect the council members that are present here this evening. First matter that we will deal with this evening is old business works in progress. Do we have anything?
We do not have no old business nor works in progress, Mr. Chair.
Proposed programmatic revisions.
None specified at this time.
Other business for discussion and possible action, boat lift and Marina Slips. Discussion and possible action to review existing regulations regarding boat and float lift systems, recreational boating facilities, and marinas.
So, Mr. Chairman, staff is going to go into this. Mason will go into this a little more, in a lot more detail. But it's a topic we'd like to explore with the Planning and Procedure Subcommittee as to whether or not this particular issue that has just been brought to our attention as a possible activity that needs to be regulated under the program is something that the program would envision as acceptable or not. And that's the discussion that we're asking you to have tonight. So if I can turn it over to Mason Sherman to explain the origin, the genesis, and the travel of the issue to your committee.
Thank you. Nathan.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. Mr. Chair, members of the subcommittee. So basically how this played out, I got a call from Marina over in Tiverton, just north of the Connor River Bridge. They were pitching to add, they have their MPL, so certified marina, pitching to add 2 boat lifts into existing slips adjacent to their floating docks. So looking into the regs for this, talking with Jeff and some other members of staff, we realized we don't really have set regulations for boat lifts in marinas. You know, we have the residential boat lifts. Obviously, we have our marina regs, but there's a gap in coverage. Even the definition, it all points towards residential boat slips explicitly. So question came up, and if you guys had a chance to read the report, and I can dive into it in more detail, but where there are gaps in coverage between the residential regs and the marina regs, where these may need to blend together, is kind of where the question comes into play. And I'll point towards the last page of my report. If anyone needs a copy, I have some here.
They have.
Okay. So here are some examples where you can see marinas that have these boat lifts. They're very prevalent in the South. Both these photos are from Florida. I think one of them is actually a safe harbor down in Florida. They're not as prevalent in the New England area, but you'll see I did a little bit of digging, was able to locate 3 in Massachusetts that definitely do have boat lifts in the slips. They're kind of scattered throughout the marinas, so you might have a 100-slip marina with 3 slips with boat lifts in them. And some of my research, especially in the South, it seems common for slip tenants to come to the marina, be like, hey, we want to put a boat lift in here. And the marina gives them the option, okay, you can pay for it up front and you won't have an increase in slip fee, or we'll put it in, increase in slip fee. So it seems like that's kind of the approach that's coming out here. I mean, I was reached out to, and they're trying to put 2 these boat lifts in existing slips, and it was like a 25 slip marina, give or take. So it seems like that's kind of a trend that's coming up, and that's why we wanted to bring it to your guys' attention and kind of get direction on path forward as far as the regulations go, because, you know, if one marina is asking about it, I'm sure there'll be more coming down the pipe. So just trying to get some direction on path forward and how we handle that in our regulations. Really the question at play.
And is the reason for wanting to put a boat lift to keep it out of the water to protect the integrity of the boat?
Yeah, essentially. I listed some pros, cons there. So, I mean, yeah, this particular person that asked about it, he's a marine contractor himself. He just bought a brand new boat, doesn't want to put bottom paint on it, wants to keep it out of the water. So, I mean, there's some pros to that. You don't have bottom paint in the bay, even if it chips off, you know, it's an improvement to water quality. You also reduce galvanic corrosion on the boat to keep it up out of the water. So there's some pros there. You know, some cons that I outlined here. potentially they take up more space. So specifically, a lot of the marinas in Rhode Island, they're all floating docks. So if you're just adding in boat lifts after the fact, you might have to kind of jangle them to get them to fit in there, and you might take up 2 slips instead of having 1. So you're losing a slip potentially. That kind of depends on the marina layout. I mean, they would have to get creative with how they're placing these things, potentially rearrange the marina itself. So that's one question that comes into play, is it could potentially impact the vessel density requirements if you're taking slips away from marina, and in turn that could result in marina expansions down the line. That makes sense.
If we can jump into and hold that thought for a second, Mason, one of the things we really wanted to impress upon you all is you take that point that if an existing slip in a marina that went through the regulatory review process and had to have a certain number of slips to meet our density requirements, now have to remove X amount of in-water slips to accommodate these lifts, you've now changed the density. And was the density requirement so tight when we approved it back then that now they're non-compliant with the original approval? So that was one of the cons that we wanted to bring to your attention. I thought it was significant because then if I'm the marina owner, I might say, well, I need to meet your density requirement. I need a bigger marina perimeter limit. I need to expand. And if you're in Newport, for example, there might not be any room to expand. So those are the things that we thought were kind of up against with this type of potential issue, and wanted to have that brought to your attention for discussion.
Is your sense that as these have gone through the approval process, many of them were very close to making their density requirement, or?
Well, that's actually a very good question, because the density requirement, I won't say it's relatively new, but we did an overhaul of our marina regulations about 15 or so years ago. And it was based on the fact that we needed to utilize the water space that a marina was asking to use for its in-water facilities to the maximum extent practical. So don't spread out. Try to have creative ways to configure your dock trees and put your boats within the smallest space possible so that you're protecting the public trust for other uses that are compatible there. Every marina since then has had to address that type of strategic review to make sure that they are being as minimal impact to the public trust in their boat slip configuration.
And some other potential issues I mentioned the con section, but big difference between southern states and up here is the tide swing, right? So down there, and I worked a lot in the Gulf, and a lot of times you only have a foot tide swing between high and low, whereas up here you're looking at more feet. Then plus storm surges and king tides these days. So if you have boat lifts and marinas, you might have at low tide a boat 15 feet out of the water and another boat way down. So that's also something to consider, and taking into account the V zone height of these boat lifts too, because you don't want a boat floating off the lift, you know what I mean? If you get a storm surge. So those are all things to consider when putting these in.
The other thing about that particular issue is the visual. Mason mentioned the tide range, and therefore you're going to have to account for that. When we did the boat and float lift section that exists now, we did it 20 plus years ago. And the subcommittee, we created a special subcommittee just for that issue. And some of the members, because I was the staff assigned to it, I remember the members having an issue with the impact of the visual view that these lifts would be. So if you remember in our boat and float lift section that we have right now, the boat gunnel can be no higher than the fixed pier of a residential dock to minimize the visual impact of raising that boat out of the water. So now you have boat slips that are at the water's level. And if you're going to raise them out, you're going to have the keel of the boat at least a foot out of the water. And depending on the boat that you're talking about, it could be 12 more feet in the air. So that was always an issue as well.
Yeah, I mean, to Jeff's point too, the way the boat lift regs are written right now, they essentially have to be adjacent to a fixed pier. A lot of these marinas, they're all floating docks, so they're not going to want to reconfigure their whole marina around 1 or 2 boat slips in the middle of the marina that are floats to put a boat lift in, so Yeah, there's a gap there as well.
So we tried to outline a lot of those pros and cons within the existing regs for discussion. And really, in the end, if it's something that we should consider, if you all want us to consider, we will. We'll come back. We'll spend some time looking at the regs and trying to make it work if boat lifts would be something that we should consider for marinas. If you don't want us to go forward based on this discussion, and that would be something we're looking for as well.
Is this something that's inevitably happening, sort of like AI? So it's better for you to kind of deal with it and have your sort of policies in place as it happens? Or is this something that we can sort of say, oh, no, we don't think that's a great idea because of visual blight or whatever it is? And it's probably.
Well, this conversation will help us with that answer when we get it. We are seeing people come to Mason in his role as that Marine Infrastructure Coordinator, CRMC, to say, hey, this is something that we want to consider. Mason's found that it is happening elsewhere in New England, so we wanted to get ahead of it. We wanted to have an answer for the contractor, for the marina. We have safe harbor marinas that have 13, 14 marinas in the state. They might think it's the best thing since sliced bread. And now all of a sudden we've got to deal with a large scale policy issue. So that's what we're just trying to get ahead of it by having the discussion up here.
Has RIB come to you with any of this yet, or are they just not an issue with them yet?
So not that I'm aware of, Mason.
No.
And if they did, it would be us knocking on their door saying, we're considering these regs, we're going to need your input.
So our role tonight really is just to say, yes, we'd like to move forward with looking at putting together some regs for this.
Or even less than that, if you can ask us to investigate it more and come up with some, I won't even say proposed regulations. I would say, give us an idea of what the regulations might look like if we go forward with this. Or if you're inclined to say, no, we don't think this is a good idea for X, Y, and Z, you can tell us to not go forward with it. But I think in the end, whether or not we have regulations, we really need to be ahead of this issue because it is coming.
Anything else to report?
Mason, did we hit everything?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a summary. I mean, I'd got an 8-page report here. I could read through it front to back, but I don't know if that's really going to be a benefit to everyone.
I read it was in the report.
I think the biggest issue we want to impress upon you is that a lot of boat owners would see this as a benefit for a lot of less maintenance responsibility for their boat. The counter to that is boats in New England are in the water for a maximum of 6 months, probably more likely 3 to 5. And is it worth the various impacts to our regulations, visual impacts, to having a marina wanted to seek more public trust land for a convenience that might not be the best for public trust resource management? Or is it? Is it something that we want to make sure that the industry can be successful in what they do? They do provide access to the boating public. They do provide a valuable asset to the public to use our resources. And this might be one way to help them maintain their viability as a commercial industry that is vital to the state of Rhode Island. So we're trying to weigh all those issues. We are an agency that is not entirely protective on one end of the spectrum, and we're not a development agency. We have to balance the two. And so do we want to see something like this go forward? And then the question is, how do we want to see it go forward?
I could understand a boat owner asking for this or someone voluntarily wanting this. Would there ever be a reason where someone would tell them you need to use a boat lift?
Mandatory boat lift versus just having a slip, you mean?
Right.
That I can think of now.
But I have a question for you, Jeff. When you said that the maximum amount of time would say, well, 5, 6 months, are you saying that because of that, it's not high on the radar because it's other things? Or, as you said, it's coming, we should do it, even if it's only 5 or 6 months, that boats will be in the water.
No,
We should have a plan.
the former. I would argue as a public trust manager that the impacts that we brought out today, visual, storm related, safety, losing density, therefore impacting other policy considerations, might outweigh the fact that a boat lift in a marina should be available. However, it's worthy of discussion, which is really we want to bring to your attention. Because I can see a marina wanting to say to their customers, we have this service.
Right.
And like Mason said, they'll pay for it if they can get a higher slip fee because of it. They'll install it if they can charge a higher slip fee.
Mhm.
So that, from an economic standpoint, I can see the marina wanting to have these available as an attraction.
Yeah, I mean, to Jeff's point, as I mentioned before, that there's a lot of safe harbors down in Florida that have these already. So I'm honestly surprised they haven't brought it up to me or Jeff or anyone else for this. Charleston Marina, for instance, in Boston, they do have their slip fees posted online. It's roughly double, a little less than double for a boat lift slip versus just an in-water slip per foot. So there is a big financial incentive for marinas to do that. Granted, it's upfront cost to put these in as well,
Yep.
and maintenance and upkeep, of course, on them.
So if we wanted to continue the discussion, what would our ask be?
Well, one thing I'd like to do, and I was just going to ask Mason one of the questions. So the follow-up would be, we'd like to go to these Massachusetts marinas and sit down with the managers, say, what did it take to install it? What does it take to maintain it? What were the regulatory hurdles? How do your customers respond to it? Are they in demand? Are they not in demand? A lot of those types of things we can bring back for further discussion.
Okay, so a question to Tony, if at the conclusion of the hearing, that was the way we wanted to go, is it a vote or is it just mere discussion that we say continue doing that?
I think it's, I'd like to see a vote actually,
Okay.
do the continuation on it.
Okay. Ron or Trish, have any other questions of Jeff or Mason?
I just have one quick question in thinking about visual blight. So, in the fact that we have seasonality here, these stay in the water, and what do they look like when they're empty?
Good question. I don't have any pictures. I mean, it's basically, so you got 4 piles for each lift, right? And then there's basically bunks underneath them. So they're usually lower down in the water, so then the boat can come in and out type of deal. I mean, in the off season, they might be raised up so you don't get algae growth and stuff. But if the boat's gone, then they're going to be lowered. So when they come back, they can just drive it on and get lifted out. So, I mean, for the most part, you're looking at 4 piles for each lift, which a marina, it's already got piles. So additional piles, potentially bunks if they're out of the water.
Like a maximum size vessel that these things can handle that you would put a limit on? I mean,
You could. I mean, they go pretty high from what I was reading down south. I mean, I think 260 ton or 260,000 pounds is the max lift. I mean, it's usually more in like the 60,000 pound range, but obviously there's a safety factor baked in there. And looking at some of these Massachusetts one on Google Earth this morning, they got 50-foot cigarette boats on them. So, and they probably don't want to paint the bottom because it's resistance, so they have a reason for that.
At the residential docks, we've seen a suite of lift capacities. At low end, like 12,000 pounds, high end, 45,000 pounds, and big boats at a residential dock. So I would suspect at a marina, you might have even bigger ones.
Any other questions? Is there any public comment? Sir, do you wish to be heard? Okay, thanks. All right, is the subcommittee in a posture for a vote? So, yeah,
Do we make a motion to allow, have the council staff further investigate pros and cons of allowing regulatory change for residential, for marina boatlets?
I think it's okay, yes, okay.
there a
I'll
second?
second that.
All right, motion is made by Mr. Gagnon, second by Ms. Reynolds. I'll poll the subcommittee. Mr. Gagnon,
I,
Ms. Reynolds,
Aye.
I too, Raymond Coy, vote aye. So that is the vote on the particular matter. Any new business?
No, Mr. Chair,
Staff reports.
no staff report.
Having nothing to come before the subcommittee, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
second.
Motion made and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Subcommittee stands adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you.